Okay, fantastic. Well, guys, Dr. Tim Rice, basketball mentoring. He's a basketball consultant with the basketball mentoring, and he's the current Irish under-20 assistant coach. We're very pleased that you could take the time and share with us some stuff. So, yeah, let's jump straight into it.
Wonderful. Well, I do appreciate everybody coming today and coming to you live from West Fargo, North Dakota. You're probably going, where in the world's West Fargo, North Dakota? We're about 4 hours north and west of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. And really excited to be able to share with you a little bit about my background over the last 30 plus years. Just talk about some of the things I've learned over that time frame. And first and foremost, I want to thank Nabil for giving all the coaches, but also us presenters, an opportunity to present this information, but also to learn. One thing that is extremely important in this profession, whether you're 50 years old or just getting into coaching or into basketball, is continuing to learn. And so I'm going to get started with our presentation here today. The Basketball Code, 30 years of lessons learned from coaching and leading. To give you a quick introduction, I am originally, like I stated, I live in West Fargo, North Dakota here in the United States. And I've been married for 25 years to my wife, Candy. I consider her the smarter of the two of us, Doctors Rice. She is a Minnesota native. I'm originally from Alabama. So I tell people that she taught me how to speak proper English. For anyone that has been down south, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm originally from the small town of Robertsdale, Alabama, which is right across the bay from Mobile, Alabama. It's what I tend to call Forrest Gump country. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, the writer of the movie or the book is Winston Groom, and he actually lives 25 minutes from where I grew up in Point Clear, Alabama on the bay. And I was fortunate to actually be a scholarship athlete at the University of Mobile in Mobile, Alabama from 1990 to 1993. And was fortunate to be an all-conference athlete, ran in 3 national meets as an athlete. And so very fortunate to actually go to Mobile, and we'll be more on that in a little bit. Been involved with basketball since 1988 in various roles, whether it was as a student assistant, as a coach, as a special assistant, or as a consultant. So I've been involved for 32 years in basketball at a pretty high level. One thing that really recently happened, of course, I was named to the under-20 coaching staff with the Irish national team. I was going to be assisting a very good friend of mine, Mike Lynch, who is one of the top coaches in the country, based in Galway, and a really good friend of mine. One thing about my experience, I've coached in over 600 games or been on the bench for over 600 games. I've head coached at numerous levels, whether it was club level, schools level, college level, both in the United States and internationally. I've worked at the National Junior College Athletic Association level, NAIA, National Christian College Athletic Association, and NCAA Divisions 1 and 3 in college basketball. The only division in college basketball I haven't worked in would be Division 2 NCAA. Served as an assistant for 9 different coaches over the last 32 years. Here's the thing about them. The coaches I've worked with have won a grand total of 2,985 games. 3 of them are in the Hall of Fame in their area, and 5 have won over 300 games in their career. And we're going to talk a little bit about those folks here throughout my presentation today. I serve in a consulting and governance role, both with Basketball Ireland since 2016, really, and with Admirals Basketball Academy, which is an organization based in Chisinau, Moldova. I've been involved with them for the last probably 5-6 months. My wife and I have. I currently lead the Doctor of Psychology program, the academic program at Ashford University in San Diego, California. I'm over 450 students and about 50 faculty members, and keeps me pretty busy. I also teach for 4 other universities as an adjunct faculty member as well. So I stay pretty busy. So today's agenda, as far as the presentation is concerned, I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what the basketball code is. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And, really my focus today is going to be on philosophy, but using my background of 32 years of being around this to kind of frame it, okay, the context of it. We're going to go through each of the 8 basketball code principles over the next few minutes and have a discussion of each one. We're also going to talk about why your coaching philosophy matters. We're going to dive into that a little bit. And then I'm going to give you a couple of takeaways from my 30+ years in the game. And then we'll have a session of questions. If you're willing to ask, I'm certainly willing to answer to the best of my ability. So you're probably going, well, what is the basketball code? The basketball code is basically a set of standards, not rules. So a lot of times when you think about coaches, some coaches have the mindset of being a policeman or a police officer, where they focus on rules compliance. They focus on making sure that folks are following rules as opposed to meeting standards for what they're doing. And so what the basketball code is it's a set of standards, more positive than rules. I don't want, in my situation, I don't want to have standards over my team. When I've coached, I would rather have positive, not negative undertones, because I believe that standards do inspire everyone in the program to get better, not just as a team, but also individually. And one of the big things, I think you're going to be hearing this a lot through the presentation today, is that it's important that what we're doing within the coaching that we do isn't just about the game. It's about using the principles in the game that we teach and having those be transferred to the lives of the players that we coach after they're done, or even during the time that they're playing for you. It's really important. Steve Lambie is one of my mentors, and he is the guy who I got the basketball code from. And he says it like this. He says the code is our team's constitution. And so what he means by that is that instead of looking at it from the standpoint of it being a rules concept, it's more about what we live by. It's the things that we value. There's standards that can lead to success, depending on how you look at success. So here are the basketball concepts. I'll go through each one of these over the next few minutes, of course. First is we listen with eyes and ears. Secondly, we run on the floor. Third, we are on time for everything. Fourth, we are responsible for our actions. Fifth, we communicate, encourage, and acknowledge. Sixth, we never tolerate anything less than our best effort from our teammates and ourselves. And seventh, we find solutions, not excuses. And then lastly, eighth, we do and say the right thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these here, and I'm going to kind of give you context based on the coaches that I've worked with and kind of how they emulated these things. So I have Steve Lambie here in this slide, and I gave him 2 of the principles because, of course, that's where I got the concept from on the basketball code. But this is a guy that, for anyone that's on the presentation, whether you're watching it live or on YouTube, it's important to understand that, this is a guy right here that really is code worthy. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as the presentation continues. But Coach Lambie is a guy who really focuses on listening with eyes and ears and having his players run on and off the floor. He has 306 wins right now, and he's a head men's coach at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh. I was fortunate to be his assistant coach for 3 years. We were, he has 306 wins. I was part of 48 of those wins, so really thankful for that. And he's won 5 conference championships, led his teams to the NCAA tournament twice, including this past year in 2020, where they got to the second round. The one thing about his focus is when he's communicating, he is very intent on players looking at him in the eyes and listening with intent, okay? Listening with their ears and with their eyes. It's extremely important when we're working with people that we make eye contact. And he really emphasized that heavily as a head coach. And ironically enough, his players have had a lot of success. 2, running on the floor. I would encourage you, I don't have a video today, but if you ever want to see a Grove City College team play, go to YouTube and go look up Grove City College 2020 PAC championship game, and you'll see a team that runs everywhere. And the reason why he focuses on that is he doesn't want his team, the opponents, to see his players tired or even look like they're defeated. They run everywhere. They run on the floor, off the floor. They run from timeouts. They are extremely active. They do not want to give any indication of weakness pertaining to fitness or that they have been defeated. They never slouch their shoulders down, lower their head. They keep their head up, and that's something that's really important. By the way, Coach Lambie won a conference championship this year and went on a 17-game winning streak, running flex at the NCAA Division III level, and that's it. So when you look at it from the standpoint of simplicity, teams couldn't stop it. So it's extremely important to understand that it's not always about what you run, it's how much you execute. The third principle is we are on time for everything. And this gentleman that you see here is a guy named Bill Elder. He is my coaching mentor. He's a guy who, in the top picture, it looks like it's from the 1950s, but it's actually from 1992-93 when I was a student assistant for him at Mobile College. It's now known as University of Mobile. And then below that picture, of course, is Coach and I about 5 years ago, and I stay in touch with Coach frequently. Just a great coach. He had over 549. He had 549 wins. He head coach at the junior college and NAI level for 28 years. Won tons of conference championships. Played in a national tournament in the junior college and NAI level. And he's a member of 3 different Hall of Fames. The top one being the NAI Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame, and he's also a member of the Montevallo Sports Hall of Fame and the City of Mobile Sports Hall of Fame. The reason why I brought him up for We Are on Time for Everything is the one thing that I learned from Coach Elder was to focus on detail and focus on being on time. Because when you're on time, you are focusing not only on getting the time you have in and being efficient and effective with it, but you're also in a position where you are respecting others. So I can't remember a single time over 3 years of working with Coach Elder in college where he was ever late. He was always on time. In fact, he was always a little bit early. And he had really high expectations for all of his players. And he certainly had them for me. The one thing that I learned and the thing that I take from him, many things I do, but the one thing I take from him is attention to detail and focusing on those little things. It makes a big difference in every person's life that is working in a professional career, whether you're coaching, whether you're working in business, whatever it is. So he taught me that, and of course he taught a lot of players that over 28 years, and he was a very successful athletic director here in the United States as well. Fourth, we are responsible for our actions. The guy you see right here is a guy named Woody Head. He was a longtime head coach of various sports at Faith Academy, a private high school in Mobile, Alabama. I was fortunate enough to work with him in the 1993-94 school year and be his assistant coach on the boys team there at Faith. We got to the state semifinals there in Alabama. And also worked with him. He was the athletic director at Faith and still is. He had 791 career victories in basketball alone. He had 1,615 wins in all sports combined. Think about that. Over a 32-year career, he coached numerous teams, won 26 state championships, 9 in basketball, and is also a Hall of Fame coach as well. The reason why I put him down for we are responsible for our actions is this. He coached at a Christian school, a school that had really high expectations and standards for being a good example. And he always focused on making sure that everyone was responsible, because when you put the jersey on and it said Faith on the chest of that jersey, that you were representing the school, but you were also representing your family, you were representing yourself, and that you need to be responsible because people will be watching. And that's something that a lot of times I don't think coaches realize or think about enough. And athletes need to think about it more. So I think that having this be an important code obviously goes without saying. And we'll talk more about the code in terms of why it's important here in a little bit. The fifth principle, we communicate, encourage, and acknowledge. The gentleman you see here is Eric Johnson. Eric was a head women's basketball coach at Division I level at Boston College and at the University of Denver for 10 years. He had 140 wins during that time, and he coached at the Division I level for 24 years total. He still coaches high school basketball in the Boston area as well as club basketball, and is heavily involved with the Positive Coaching Alliance, which I'm also involved with, and I'll talk more about that by the end of the session today. He's also, I worked with him. I was fortunate to work with him for 2 years as his special assistant at the University of Denver. And the one thing that you could say about Eric is he has high energy. Anyone that had a chance to meet him during the Killarney presentation that we had this past November, coaching clinic actually on October 31st in Killarney, as well as at the Triple Threat Basketball Camp, can certainly testify to that point, that he has tons of energy. And he was always big on communicating, encouraging, and acknowledging. He was huge, just one of the best examples I've ever seen in terms of his ability to really encourage his team to continue to push through and strive for excellence at all times. He started every game, I'll never forget it, he started every game walking down the bench and slapping 5 with every single player on his team. And he was always standing up and going up and down the sidelines, clapping, encouraging. And he also was one of the best communicators I've ever seen in terms of coaching. He's one of the good guys. He's one of the good guys in the business. And, you know, he's somebody that has certainly transferred from coaching into his own business life afterwards, but from Division I into what he does now. Certainly one of the good guys. And so if you need his contact information, let me know. He made a huge impact on my career and on my life. Next, and this is a guy who really has had a huge impact on my life, Kieran Murphy. And, you know, I met Kieran in the summer of 1991 at a summer camp in New York State called Racket Lake Boys Camp. He was the basketball coach there for 10 years. I was fortunate to meet him and work with him during a 4-year span when I was a camp counselor there and also a group leader. The number 6 code principle, we never tolerate anything less than our best effort from our teammates and ourselves. The reason why I chose him for this is simple. If anyone can share, anyone that's ever played for him, and anyone that ever was a student or a pupil of his at St. Mary's College will testify, they will state that he was about nothing less than giving your best effort. He is legendary in Galway for working players very, very hard. And one of the things with Kieran that I always appreciated was that he held folks to a high standard. And he's held me to a high standard through the years. And I consider him not only a mentor, but a really great friend. You know, he coached and taught at St. Mary's for over 35 years in Galway. And he was also a former National League player with Democrats and also a coach there within the National League in Galway. And, you know, one thing that he did for me during my career really is he gave me my first team to ever be a head coach of. In the 1991 summer, I was the head coach of the under-12 Racket Lake boys team that played in the Adirondack Cup tournament at Brant Lake Camps, which is another camp there in the Adirondack Park of New York State. And he gave me that opportunity, and I actually met him on a basketball court. I took a jump shot, and he knocked the crap out of me, and I landed on my back, and he came over and put his hand out to pick me up. And then I had to learn more about, you know, him. And so I've had a chance to really develop a great relationship with him over the last nearly 30 years. And he is somebody who's always held folks to a higher standard. And I think that as a player, and especially as a coach, we have to do the same thing. The seventh bit here of the code principle is we find solutions, not excuses. And I bring up Harry Sheehy for this one. Now, I was fortunate to work with Coach Sheehy during the 1999-2000 season at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts. he is one of the guys that I've learned. I mean, in that 1 year period, I learned so very much about motivation, and I learned about expectations, and I learned about kind of finding solutions from Coach Sheehy. You know, he had 324 wins during his 17-year career at Williams. He led his teams to 13 NCAA appearances. That's in 17 years. Think about that. He had 9 20-win seasons, 8 back-to-back, 2 in New England championships, and 2 Final Four appearances as a head coach there at Williams. And his final recruiting class, I was fortunate to be on his staff the final year he was the head coach at Williams. He became the athletic director the next year. And during that 99-2000 year, I was fortunate to work with Coach Sheehy and helping recruit the class that ended up winning the national championship in 2003. And I was fortunate also to be at that game in Salem, Virginia. An incredible moment for me to see players that I helped recruit go and win a national title. He's currently the athletic director at Dartmouth in the Ivy League and is continuing to strive for excellence there. And he was inducted into the New England Basketball Hall of Fame in 2002. And if you look at the slide, those are some pretty big names that he was inducted with. Bob Cousy, Patrick Ewing, Julius Erving, Jim Calhoun, and Gino Auriemma. Those are some pretty big names. But I want to give you a quick example of what I learned from Harry. One of the things that I learned from Coach Sheehy was one of the first weeks that I was there. I remember sitting in his office and him saying to me, you know what, T, because he called me T. So, you know what, T, players these days have never been told that's not good enough, son. And I think that it's important because a lot of times kids that we would get would be all state players, 1,000-point scorers in high school, and they get to us and they would never have been pushed to the point where they didn't do what was necessary. And so he told me that, and it stuck with me throughout my career, including what I do now as a faculty member and working with dissertation students. And when I coach, you know, I really have high expectations. But there were many times during that year where we had to come up with solutions and not make excuses. We had to figure out a way to get around what our situation was and solve our issue. And I think that that's important as a coach, but also as a player. There are going to be times, anytime that you're in a situation where you're on the court, whether it's in practice games, even if you're in the bus coming to and from a game or in the van or wherever it might be, that's something that, you have to find a solution and not come up with an excuse. And lastly, we do and say the right thing. This guy right here is a guy named Sid Elliott. And Coach Elliott is a guy who gave me my start in college basketball. And I'll tell you a quick story about it. And if you look at the last bullet there, talks about, how I got that start. I was taking his bowling class in the summer of 1988. And I was, surprisingly enough, I was a studio art major at the time. And I was talking to him one day and I said, yeah, Coach Elliott, I'm interested in possibly going into physical education, maybe into coaching. And he said, he's like, yeah, well, we have a physical education program. I said, well, you have a track program at Enterprise State Junior College, where he was at and where I was a student. And he said, no, but we have basketball and baseball here. And I said, well, I don't think I'd probably be good enough to get a full scholarship to play basketball for you. He's like, well, we have a student assistant manager scholarship here. I said, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, it's a full ride scholarship. And my jaw dropped, by the way. I accepted that, and I was able to work with Coach Elliott for 2 years at Enterprise State Junior College in Enterprise, Alabama. Coach Elliott played in the Southeastern Conference at Tennessee during the time of Adolph Rupp's coaching era at Kentucky, which is a very long era. But if you've ever seen a Kentucky game, the arena is named Rupp Arena, where they play. And Adolph Rupp, one of the winningest coaches of all time. Coach Elliott played against his teams, so played against a legend. He was head coach at Enterprise State for 21 years and won 4 conference championships during that time. And I'm going to give you a quick story about Coach Elliott with respect to number 8, we do and say the right thing. He had this incredible speech that he would say every single year on the bus before we would get off the bus to go get our pregame meal the first time on the road. And he called it the bread and tea speech. And I always found this to be so funny, but it was also so incredibly powerful because I used it with my players later on when I was a head coach too. And what he would always say is that he would basically do an example of some of the players he had in the past when we'd go into a restaurant and the player would say, I want bread, I want tea. Because of course down south, everybody loves sweet tea, right? Well, instead of going in and saying, I want bread, I want tea, he would make sure the players would say, could I have some extra bread, please? And could I have another cup of sweet tea, please, ma'am? Thank you. So he actually would have his players do and say the right things at all times. And that's something that, I don't think is really focused on enough. So I always talk about the bread tea speech all the time. Over 30 years later, it's something that really impacted my coaching career. And that doesn't have anything to do with the X's and O's. It really has everything to do with the Jimmies and the Joes. So what are the takeaways from these coaches? I mean, what are the things that I gained from these coaches? The first thing that's really important to consider is this. They had a philosophical approach to everything they did, okay? They all focused on concepts that would not only impact success on the court, but also impact the lives of those they coached. And I think that it's really important to share that with you all because philosophy is an incredibly important piece when it comes to being a coach. That's why I wanted to share the code with you to use as an example for your own teams. I'm not saying you have to use it the same way. You can maybe change it however you want. That's the beauty of what we do is you can use things you like and not use things you don't. So, but the thing is, they all had a philosophy of how they coached. They all had a philosophy of how they led their players and their teams. And I think that all of them wanted to see their players go on and be successful in life, not just in basketball. Basketball was just a part of the overall training ground for their life. And the other thing too, that each of these coaches, they held their student athletes accountable and their players accountable, and not because they wanted to hold it over them, but because they wanted to help the players become great citizens and that are going to impact the world. And each one of them sees teachable moments, and they were always looking at ways to point out to players how what they learn in sport could be applied to their own lives. Such an incredible part of what you can get from these coaches is that each one of them had an opportunity to impact their players. Now, again, you heard what I said, 2,800 or 2,985 wins between all of these coaches. And yet the most important thing they'll always be remembered for is the impact that they made on their lives of these people. Okay, because most people are not going to remember the scores. Most people aren't going to remember the records. They might not even remember the championships, but they're going to certainly remember what they felt and how they were treated and how they learned. Okay, here's some more stuff. These coaches have led many players, okay, former players into teaching and coaching like me, but they've also led them into leadership positions across various career fields. Maybe some of the folks that are out there watching right now, whether you're watching this live or on YouTube, have done the same thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about holding a ladder in a second and what my philosophy is on that. But the legendary coach, Tony Bennett, he's definitely led many people to success in playing and also coaching. But he said this, I want these young guys to learn about the joy of family and the joy of what will matter in their life. And sports is one of the greatest classrooms that I can think of, and adversity is maybe the greatest teacher. We have the opportunity to use the adversity that sports provides, whether it's on the court, off the court, wherever it is, in the classroom. We have an opportunity to teach folks how to be successful. Okay, so why does your coaching philosophy matter? Why does it matter? I think one of the big things why it matters is this. Okay, it matters because it's what you value. It's a statement of what you value and how you approach your coaching role. It covers your purpose as a coach and really your approach to comprehensive player development and success pertaining to that development of your team and as players. And it's going to consist of major objectives and beliefs and philosophy principles that you adhere to in order to achieve your objectives, okay? Philosophy isn't just about coaching, it's about business leadership. You find it everywhere, okay? And here's something that's extremely important for everyone that's watching to get, okay? Your philosophy is going to guide you on how you behave as a coach and how you interact with your athletes. And it should reflect who you are and who you want to be, okay? It's based on your experiences, knowledge, values, opinions, and beliefs. Now, when you look at my situation, obviously I've been impacted through over 30 years of being around coaches that are Hall of Fame coaches, folks that have won a lot of games. A lot of people have been impacted by these coaches and have gone on to great success in life. And you know, but when you look at it from how you coach, it should reflect who you are and who you want to be, and how you behave and how you interact with your athletes. I can honestly say I've made mistakes. We all have, right? But one thing is I love about life is that we continue to learn each and every day, right? And so, but your coaching philosophy matters so much, okay? I wanted to offer my coaching philosophy, and real quickly, here's mine, okay? And I really have gotten a lot of this from Steve Lambie at Grove City, but also others that I've worked with. I think executing the fundamentals is extremely important as a basketball coach in teaching your players, you know, but it's also important from the standpoint of life. You have to be able to execute the fundamentals of being able to speak, being able to be on time, being accountable, being reliable, fundamentals for success, having a work ethic that's second to none. But as it says, we are what we repeatedly do. It's not an act, but it's a habit, okay? Defensive pride is the second portion of my coaching philosophy. Anyone that has ever talked to me or ever seen me in action knows that that's an area that I love to teach. And, you know, it's not a variable, it's a constant. It has to be embedded deeply into your attitude as a coach. And you have to do it all the time well, because playing defense is something you do all the time, even if you're not making shots. And then teamwork, obviously, is another big element when it comes to overall development of players, not just on the court, but off the court as, you know, individuals and as team members. It all takes a group effort, and having individual commitment brings it all together, and it's what makes a team work, a company work, a society work, and a civilization work. So execute the fundamentals, defensive pride, and teamwork. Those are my coaching philosophy principles. I do have the defensive philosophy information here and offensive philosophy information. You know, my guess is that Nabil will have this presentation saved on the website. I'm not going to go into great detail about this. If you do want more information on this, you can feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to send this information to you. But my big thing defensively is no layups, no second shots, and contest every shot. I would, if you're watching games, okay, and hey, everybody's watching basketball right now from old film and stuff. Watch and see how many shots are actually contested, and watch and see how many players are actually checked out or boxed out. You'll be surprised how many people actually just use their athleticism to get rebounds, as opposed to making contact physically and then getting after a contest of a shot and doing that. So I'm really big on that when it comes to the defensive side of things. Offensively, 4 different principles that I look at: handling the ball, taking good shots, making sure when you take shots that you are taking them, that they're not contested shots unless it's in the paint. And also, because good shots are going to obviously help you. You know, a bad shot is almost like a turnover when it comes to the offensive side. And then getting second shots, extremely important. We have to be able to understand how to counter box outs and get around those. And, you know, we want to get more shot attempts. And if we get more shot attempts, make them too. It's extremely important if we're going to get offensive boards. And then executing quickly and aggressively, you know, as you can see in the second bullet there, being detail oriented. I've talked about that here, learning it from Coach Elder, extremely important, and being disciplined and seizing the initiative. But we have to understand too, in that first bullet point under execute quickly and aggressively, our success is not about which offense we run, but how well we execute our offense. Just like the example I brought up from Coach Steve Lambie at Grove City, you know, they run the flex offense. I mean, I don't know about you all, but you know, it's all this is a combination. It's a bunch of combination screens, but people don't know how to defend it these days. So they run the snot out of it, and they're successful with it. And watching a team not be able to stop it, for me, it was actually kind of interesting to watch this past year during the NCAA tournament, because you know, he just does a great job in having them execute. Okay, so takeaways from over 30 years in the game. Okay, in Greek, the true definition of the word passion, or pathos, is to suffer, okay? So when you hear people talk about passion, I'm so passionate for coaching, I'm so passionate about what I do. But you have to understand this, guys and gals, that passion leads to suffering. And what I mean by that, not in a negative way, but I worked in the game for many, many years as a full-time coach, and I always talked about being passionate and passionate and passionate. It's not easy, okay? This is not a game that is all about glitz and glamour. This is about working hard, and you're gonna suffer at times. That is something that I think everybody should understand, that, you know, when you talk about being passionate, you have to understand that there's a possibility you might suffer, okay? Next, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. This is from John Wooden, the Wizard of Westwood, and the guy that I, you know, basically base a lot of my philosophy on. One thing that I know that I did a poor job of when I was a head college coach is I thought that I knew everything. I was young. I was 35 years old when I stepped away from being a head college coach. And part of it was that I didn't think I could learn from other people. You know, the thing is, I think that you can learn more when you get out of your own way and you're able to understand that there are so many more things to learn. And when you get to a point where you think you've learned it all, then you need to start digging some more. It really is after you've learned it all, if you will, that it counts. You have to continue to learn. And that's why I'm glad you're on this presentation today and you're watching. Next, make the big time where you're at. Listen, many of you coach in Ireland. You know, we may have other folks from other parts of Europe or here in the United States that are listening today. You know, make the big time where you're at. You know, just because you are not at the highest level does not mean that you're not at the best level that you should be at right now. It may mean that you're learning during that time. It may mean that you're right in the sweet spot if you're where you should be. You know, I know that for me, I'm just really learning that, and it's taken me almost till my 50th birthday to get to that. But I think that making the big time where you're at is critically important. Never forget where you're from either. Okay, one of the things is this, and this is my opinion. I'm a small town kid from Robertsdale, Alabama, who grew up in a trailer house on government cheese, welfare, and powdered milk. And I had an alcoholic mother. You know, I know where I came from. And so I can actually know that because of the education, because of the game of basketball, because of mentoring that I received from those folks that coached me through the years, whether it was coaches in high school, coaches in college, and people I meet to this very day, that I can understand that I know where I came from. And I know that because of all those people investing in me, that I was able to get to the place where I am at. Have I arrived? Absolutely not. In fact, I hope I never arrive. I hope I can continue to grow and continue to get better. Next one, know your why. Too many people get into the business of coaching because they think that they know they're getting into it for the glitz and glamour, especially here in the United States. I don't necessarily know if it's the same. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the same in Ireland or other parts of the world, but I do know this. Here in the United States, a lot of people get into this business because they want to put that suit and tie on and walk across and shake the hands of the opposing coach and have the crowds and everything else. You need to understand what your why is. For me, my why is helping other people climb a ladder, and we'll talk more about that in a second. The best teachers of this game aren't often at the highest level. Folks, this is extremely important for everyone to understand, that the best teachers might be in middle school, in the primary schools where you're at. They may be some folks that are in your clubs that are lower levels. They're not always going to be, in our case, in NCAA Division I in the United States. You know, I've seen great teachers at that level. I've seen some people that aren't very good at all. So being able to understand that just because you're at a specific level that's maybe higher than others doesn't mean you can't learn from other people. That's something that I learned a great deal about over the last really 14 years, because I know 14 years ago when I walked away from being a head college coach, I felt like I couldn't learn anything from anyone that was lower than me. And I've learned some incredible things from people. I mean, even in AAU tournaments here in the United States, folks that, you know, aren't full-time coaches. And I think that gaining appreciation that way is extremely important. I think teaching and modeling character is extremely important through the game. Caring, honesty, respect, and responsibility. You know, players are going to do what you do. Players are going to mimic what you do. And so it's important to be able to hold the ladder for others. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Here's a quote from Carl Menninger, who was a noted 20th century psychiatrist. What a teacher is more important than what he teaches. Okay, just read that to yourself. What a teacher is more important than what he teaches. It's who you are and how you model character and how you treat players and how you treat people. That's the most important thing in terms of what you're teaching. Okay, you're teaching from your own example. Okay, teaching life lessons and always competing is extremely important as a coach. I think it's something that you know, a lot of times we think win, 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 win. But if you ever to read anything on John Wooden, he never even talked about winning, ever. All he focused on was having his players reach the highest level they possibly could in terms of giving the most effort they could. That was success to him. And I think that is extremely important. But in order to do that, you have to compete hard. And as a coach, you have to compete hard because, again, players are going to be watching you. And our job is to teach life lessons through the sport. Another thing that I've learned over the last 30 plus years is networking is a difference maker in this business. The reason why I'm talking to you right now is because I networked. I networked to meet Kieran Murphy in 1991, and then he said, "Hey, come on over to Ireland." 5 years ago, and we visited. My wife Candy and I visited Ireland during that fall for our 20th wedding anniversary. And then I networked with people in Galway, and then I networked with Basketball Ireland, and then I networked with others. And I think it's extremely important to get out there and make connections. I met Nabil and networked with him. That's the reason why we're talking right now, okay? And I think that's extremely important for everyone to understand and remember. And before I move on to this, another takeaway, and this is not on my list, but it's extremely important to understand, that if any of you are married or have a significant other, respect your significant other and know that they're there to support you. If you have someone like my wife, Candy, who is, again, the smarter of the two of us, but she supported me throughout the entire last 25, 26 years. And without her support, I certainly would never have gotten to the point where I am now, and I haven't arrived, but she's always been there to support me. And I think that if you have anyone that cares for you, respect that and appreciate it and show that respect every single day because it matters. Just wanted to share that with you. Okay, now holding a ladder. You've heard me talk a little bit about this. Holding a ladder is a concept that I'm really passionate about now. One of the big things is holding ladders about serving others, having no task that is too small as far as the mentality is concerned. And I believe that it can lead to success in the places that matter the most. And, I think that when we give effort every single day, we have a chance to be successful. We also have a chance to help others be successful. And there are people on this call today that I've been fortunate to hold a ladder for, and I'm really thankful for that. And it's not about me patting myself on the back. It's about seeing folks reach a level of success that is way different than just, the level of wins or losses. Okay, so we have an opportunity to hold a ladder. Like if in championship situations, we hold a ladder for a team that's going to cut down the nets during the Final Four or the national championship game or whatever, And so my goal is to hold that ladder to help others climb the ladder to greater success, because holding the ladder takes selflessness. It's not selfish in any way. Because you are helping others be able to climb the ladder to greater success, whether you get thanked or not. That's not the point. The point is that you're able to lead those people and that they can lean into you and that you can help them climb to reach their potential. I mean, the folks that mentored me certainly did that. They invested in my life. And I would encourage you all to do the same in holding a ladder for others in your role as a coach. So in closing, you have a great responsibility to teach a game, but also teach life lessons. It goes without saying. We talked about this quite a bit in this presentation. And here's the thing too, strive to be a mentor. And if you don't have a mentor yet, maybe you're just getting into the game. If you don't have a mentor yet, go find one. There are people throughout any place that you're at, whether you're in Ireland or Northern Ireland or Moldova or wherever you're watching this from in the United States, mentors are willing to help you. I'm a mentor, and I would love to be able to hear more about your story. One other thing, as a coach, you need to understand this. People are always watching you. So I know I watched all of my mentors and how they did things. And I looked at what I liked and what I didn't like, and I brought it into who I am. And I think it's important to walk the talk and live what you coach. Okay. So if you're a yeller or a screamer, don't be surprised if your players do the same thing. Every person has their own way of doing things, but ultimately we have to understand that everyone is watching, and our reputation will be based on that. I'm not going to read The Chap Who Follows Me by James Gibbon, but I want you to take note of this. And if you get a chance, go to Google and Google it. This was actually John Wooden's favorite poem. And this is something that basically will encompass all the things I'm talking about in terms of people watching. Okay, take a chance. When you get a chance, go look at that. If you do not currently have a coaching philosophy, go develop one. Man, right now there's so much time we have right now. You're all at home, away from work perhaps. Some of them you're teaching online, like me right now. But you got a chance to go look up some information on coaching philosophy. There's so much out there. Here's the other thing: keep learning. When you're through learning, you're through. And this is a quote from Will Rogers, who was an American humorist from the early 20th century. I think it's extremely important. If you get to a point where you think that you aren't learning anymore, go dig something else up. Because the thing is, when you quit learning, you might as well just go dig a 6-foot hole and jump in it. Because ultimately, we have, as a life that we live, we have a chance to continue to grow, and we should. It's all a question of whether you decide to grow. Having an open mind, extremely important. So those are just some things I want to close with. And then I welcome any questions. My website's there. Of course, it's under construction, so it's not available right now. But I've provided my email account. That's my personal email account, my Twitter account, my phone number here in North Dakota. And just wanted to close with holding a ladder so others can climb to greater heights. If you have an opportunity to do that, I highly recommend that you do that in your role. You know what? But be true to yourself. It's extremely important. So thanks so much for giving me a chance to share with you today.
That is fantastic, Coach. Really appreciate you taking the time and diving into that. And I mean, I can hear the passion when you speak, and I'm relating that back to the slide to suffer. So I hope you're not suffering too much, but really do appreciate it. Some questions coming through right now. One of the questions we have right now is, so in terms of the basketball code, which you went through at the start, what drills can you suggest to train little kids in these perspectives? So I'm going to assume here that little kids is under 14 down, and perhaps you can take maybe 1 or 2 codes, and or if you can do all of them, but go ahead.
Well, I think one of the big things when you think about I think, can you bring the slide back up real quick? Share the slide. Is the slide still on?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I'm going to take it back. Yeah, I'm just going to take it back to the code so we can all take a look at it together. One of the things that I think is really important with the code, and I think that's a good question. I think one of the things you can do, let's just look at it in terms of the first one. Each one of these can be put into your practice plan, okay? You can focus on one of these every day in your practice that you have. And I know many of you in Ireland have a very small amount of time, as Michael Toulon talked about just a couple days ago, and Puff Summers talked about the other night too. But like when you think about in terms of listening with eyes and ears, one of the big things that you can do is when you bring everyone together, that you bring that up, okay? You talk about right before a practice session or a training session, making sure everybody's making contact with eyes and ears. And if they aren't making contact, ask them, okay, everybody, see what I'm saying, look at me. It's extremely important to be able to do that. Now, as far as running on the floor is concerned, one of the big things that I would have, again, here's my big thing, guys and gals, when it comes to coaching. I'm not a line running coach, okay? I'm just not. I would rather have running involved in all of our drills throughout a practice. And so if we run from drill to drill, I think that's extremely important. That's one way that you can put that into your training sessions. obviously, if we're on to be on time for everything, that is all about making sure everybody is going to be there on time. Now, I know some players may have certain things that come up, making sure that in the fifth one that they communicate with you what those issues are, that they may be a little bit late. So it's really important. As far as being responsible for actions and never tolerating anything less, I mean, all these different things are things that I wouldn't necessarily say are that you bring into as far as a basketball specific drill, but it's something that you can hold players accountable for. Like, you know, it may be something that you, when you're planning your practice, and we haven't even talked about practice planning here, but, you know, with respect to practice planning, making sure you're organized and that you have every single day. Pat Price is really good at this on his practice planning, having a concept or a motto for the day. Maybe making one of these a motto for each day you have a practice, and just going in before every practice saying, okay, today we're going to talk about doing and saying the right thing, and come up with an example for that. You know, each one of you have a story to tell. Here's the thing about coaches. The best coaches are the best storytellers. So you have to be able to use examples from your own experience. Even for you young coaches that have just gotten into coaching, I think being able to use specific examples from your own playing career can make a big difference.
Awesome. Perfect. Appreciate that. Next question we've got here. Do you think fundamentals has changed over the course of your coaching career? The game has changed so much, so do the fundamentals that you would have taught years ago, are they outdated now, or do they stay the same?
No. Well, I think that what we've seen is an increase in individual workouts. You know, if we go back to 1988, you certainly didn't have basketball trainers roaming all around. You didn't have people that were doing it for a business. You didn't have people that were out to do that. And I think it's great. You know, some of my best friends are basketball trainers and have helped me a lot with some of my players in the past. So I think that's what's the big thing that's changed since that time. But you know, listen, you know, fundamentals that John Wooden taught in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I mean, they're still valid today. It's all a question of, you know, I know that today we have a lot more focus on individual things such as Euro steps, pro hops, you know, different things that you teach in individual offensive stuff. So I think it has changed from that perspective. But ultimately, the bottom line is this: we have to stop the other team from putting that thing in the rim, and we have to put it in the rim more than they do. That's fundamental as it gets.
Perfect. The next two, which came up as questions, but it's not a question. I just thought I'd share them with you. Thanks, Coach. Great presentation. Love how you shared where you learned each of the things and attributed it to the person. So that's one. Next one is thank you for your experience. So I thought I'd just shout them out there to you. And finally, we've got the last question here for you today. What do you think young Irish male players need to be great at to succeed in America at a collegiate level?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, ultimately, the most important thing that players in Ireland need to do in terms of, I mean, we're seeing such and so everyone knows I'm heavily involved with Basketball Ireland with the Elite Performance Committee and have done a lot of work in the country, obviously. And it's my favorite country in the world to go. And I feel like it's home for me. But I would say this, that the biggest thing that players in Ireland need to understand is that going from Ireland to the United States, and if anybody's heard any of Jason Colleen's, he has a podcast right now with a player, I believe, from ANA or one of the teams that was just posted. Yeah, and he talks about this a little bit. Ultimately, you have to be prepared to going from 2 days a week of work to working 5-6 days a week, having individual workouts, having study table, going to classes, lifts, conditioning. You know, it's 12 months out of the year. I think that's the big thing. I know that the other thing too, and I know a lot of Irish young people are coming to the United States and going to prep school. I think it's a wonderful idea to get kind of prepared to go to that next level. I think I think the young people in Ireland need to understand that it's just another level. And a lot of people think that playing Division III in the United States is just for chumps. Well, it isn't. You know, I recruited all-state players every year that play Division III. In fact, we had teams that, you know, Williams could beat Division I teams. So, I mean, I think that that's something, it's one of the things a lot of times people don't think about. They think about the level and they think about, well, Division III is a low level. Well, the bottom line is it's still a good level of basketball. And ultimately, we have to, I think players need to understand that, what you're going to get when you come over here, you're going to get busted up. It's not easy. And that goes for coaching too. I work 80, 90-hour weeks when I was a head college coach. And, I think that it takes you remember what I talked about with passion? There you go. I would say whoever asked that question, if you're interested in coming to the United States, get ready to suffer, because it's not going to be easy.
Perfect. Really do appreciate that, Coach. Really appreciate you taking time.